somebody requested a video on hurt and sadness repression. And I'm just going to throw love repression in there. I'm going to go out on a limb here. And because I think I can connect with the sadness and love repressors, the sadness and hurt repressors, even though I'm not one, by including love repression. Because I think that a lot of you are going to relate to this, because being loving and affectionate is vulnerable. And so is showing sadness or hurt. And what I've learned through the years, not as a rule, but generally, is that people who repress sadness and hurt also have to hold their love back. And that makes me cry, because that's my partner. What I know about my partner is that he has a lot of love. He's just full of love. But because of his trauma, he can't express it. And it's so connected to not being able to express hurt and sadness. So it might not appeal to everybody as I lump it together, but I think it'll appeal to quite a few of you. See if I can really, really resonate or have you resonate with me today, even though this is not my repression. So this isn't my direct experience. I have to be honest about that, because you guys might catch me through the video sharing something that isn't really accurate, or I'm being honest here because it's not my repression. But I have tons of experience with it because I'm married to a sadness repressor. I'm surrounded by those folks. Some of my fellow facilitators and trainers are sadness repressors. They built the work with me, explained that to me. And I have repression, so I know what that's like. But I have to do that caveat because I can't be all things. And sometimes teachers pretend to like be able to answer all questions as if they know everybody's experience. And that's ridiculous. Redonkulous. Sorry, that was a reference to the movie Wanderlust. Nobody's going to know that reference. If anybody knows that reference to Redonkulous, please let me know. Which character said it? Okay, so here we go. Bear with me. Just so you know, I don't repress sadness or hurt. Let me explain a couple things, because this will also help you see whether you do. Because you can see, this is what it's like for somebody who doesn't repress sadness or hurt. Let me explain. When I was a kid, my dad would come down and sit next to me and didn't start crying. Like about something that he cared very deeply about, or something that was going on with me or something. But sadness and hurt never seemed weird to me as a kid. Here's my dad, 6'2", very masculine, kind of the epitome of a heterosexual man. I mean, everybody said my dad is like the ideal man. Masculine, strong, also very loving and kind. So most of my trauma, well, I can't say that. Most of my trauma came from bullying and my mother, but there was some dad stuff. I just wanted to share with that, because I grew up not really being able to relate to a lot of you who have sadness and hurt repression. And for a long time, I think I was trying to relate to you, and I can't. And I think that was my bypass as a teacher. I came out and I was sharing about how my own story of unlovable, remember that? Years ago, 10 years ago, that I had worked through, or was just at the tail end of working through. That, that was a bypass. I can't connect with you on that. Let me explain. Hurt and sadness is a safer emotion because Dad could express it. So it wasn't held back in me. So when I came to be a teacher, that emotion wasn't really held back. So I could feel it. And then I would do inquiry and I would say to people, if you have that hurt or wounded feeling with that identity, just allow that. Well, there's a lot of anger repressors like me who had buried anger. And the hurt or the sadness was the safer emotion coming out with the unlovable or other story. So we were all just bypassing there. I was. See, because I was staying away from the anger. The hurt and the sadness was accessible to me. It was a safer emotion. So I was inquiring on the hurt and sadness of being unlovable and staying incredibly safe from the anger. And then I got 3 diseases from what I think is anger repression. Can you see how important I think what we're doing in the world really is when you really, really see it? Because you could be, right now, sadness and hurt repressors could be avoiding sadness and hurt to the detriment of your health, but you don't know it because you're sitting here questioning, for example, anger or something that's not repressed. How many sadness or hurt repressors are here in spirituality because of their anger? That's why my husband would have come. In the past, he doesn't really have that kind of anger now because he's gotten in touch with his vulnerability. But he would have come to spirituality for his anger, not knowing what was going on. Now, not all sadness and hurt repressors find anger to be safer. So there'll be some sadness and hurt repressors who don't get angry, but they might feel it though, unless it's too also repressed. But if you get triggered and you're feeling anger, whether you express it or not, if that's like an emotion that comes up pretty readily for you, whether you express it or not, you're not a sadness or hurt repressor probably. Excuse me. Let me just back up here. If you express anger, if you can express or feel anger, even if you can just feel it in a trigger, then you're probably not an anger repressor. Sorry. Right? And so some sadness repressors come to spirituality for their anger issue, but your anger is not really an issue. You feel and express anger. Your issue is that you haven't gotten to the vulnerable emotions underneath that and the fear of expressing that. And so your anger is safer. See, it's not, you don't have to get to your anger problem. You don't have an anger problem. But you might think you do. And so you come to spirituality like my husband has or did, thinking, well, if I can just deal with my anger. But that's safe, see. That's just too safe to come here and deal with your anger, because then you don't have to deal with the sadness or the hurt. So you've got to switch tracks. Get away from the anger, which is safer for you, and get to the repression of hurt or sadness under it. That's the most important thing I can say. One of them to sadness or hurt repressors: stop spinning your fucking wheels, guys, like I was doing with anger. Just sitting here avoiding anger and processing or allowing emotions that are safer, like hurt or sadness. And then you guys are here, you've got buried hurt and sadness, or hurt sadness. You're allowing anger. We're all bypassing in this way. Because I'll just tell you, I have yet to meet the people outside of KI who go to the repression directly. And so this is totally new. It's new information. And if you don't do the somatic testing, the how to get started on the inside out path, or how to start the inside out path video, then this will just totally elude you. You'll just hear it, and even if it resonates, you'll go back to your practice of dealing with anger or not dealing with hurt and sadness. And I've seen it so many times. Like that's the status quo right there. That's how people are. It's very rare for people to get to the root. It's what I've seen in spirituality generally. Very, very, very rare, unless they awaken and they do a lot of sort of, not a lot, but just they're open to embodiment and they're willing to go there. And most people just are not willing to go there. So most people don't truly embody presence if they have hurt or sadness repression. It's actually very rare. I've just noticed that, because a lot of teachers say they have. You can tell that they're hurt or sadness repressors, and they might say that they're awakened and embodied, but they're too quick to anger. It's like, well, okay, but that's safe. Like, show us your hurt or vulnerability. Or if you're that awake and embodied, here's what I think how that should show up. That would not show up as a knee-jerk anger response. So there's teachers who repress hurt and sadness. You might see them get angry. Well, anybody could get angry, but I want you to just notice people who were saying they're free, though. Because if a hurt or sadness repressor is getting kind of like fairly angry easily, or just more easily than hurt or sadness, that person has trauma, no matter what they say. Because as you reverse the repression of hurt or sadness, you don't go to anger in the same way. You just don't. The anger starts to go away because you're getting to the root. And so if you see anybody who says they've healed hurt or sadness, repression, or even trauma, that, and they're still getting angry like that, they're bamboozling you. The same is true for a teacher or anybody who says they've worked through anger, repression, or trauma and can't get angry, or only goes to hurt or sadness, or just is always present when there's anger in the room. All of that is a bamboozle until somebody explains their process, because it's just rare now for people to actually heal trauma. And because it's so rare, most people are not healing trauma. So people are actually bamboozling other people, is what I'm saying. Teachers, coaches who are refusing or do not know they have repression are then leading other people. That's where it gets really kooky. See, that's where so many of you don't even know you have repression. You don't know how your leaders are leading you, like I was. That's where it just gets crazy. Blind leading the blind. Because teachers or others will not find out if they have repression. So the reason I'm saying that is not to pick on the teachers again. It's to help you, because you guys are the future helpers. You just don't know it yet. As you get free from KI or wherever, you're going to be turning around and talking to other people. So I just want to say to you, you have the opportunity to not do what these people do. You have the opportunity to not bamboozle yourself when you get here. And work on things that are not relevant, like anger, or for sadness or hurt repressors, to sit and work with anger or just not to get to the sadness or hurt. It's a waste of time. It really is. It's me not getting to anger on the path was a waste of time. I don't think my path, in a way, really even started until 2018 when I finally got to the repression. And I think a lot of you with sadness and hurt repression, in some ways your path hasn't started. And you'll see it. Like, you'll see the indicia of it. You can't recognize awareness because of the repression. You can't stabilize in it. It's either that or I've got it, I've lost it. Or it's like you have this recognition of presence, but then in relationship, your non-duality or your awareness is right out the window. This is the plight of sadness, hurt repressors on the path. Their triggers get the best of them, and they don't know what to do with that anger if it comes out. They can't get past it in many cases, and that totally keeps them safe. Totally keeps them safe, because they need to get to the sadness or hurt. So I see a lot of sadness or hurt repressors just kind of spinning their wheels in spirituality. Trigger, anger, identity, rest, question, miss it all. See, just totally miss the repression. And then that goes on if the person processes. That's if the person processes. Then they're bypassing, but most people don't even know how to process. There's a lot of people on earth who, with sadness or hurt repression, when they get angry, they don't know. They don't even rest. They don't do anything. But the people in spirituality, the practices that I see are rest, which would miss the sadness and repression buried. So resting as awareness during your suffering or your triggers is the bypass for sadness and hurt repressors. It's one of the ways you bypass. Another way is to go to the anger, to go to the safer emotions, or to go to the identity there always, which is just protecting you from the sadness and hurt. This is something that we can have you verify too in the members area or in KI. That, yeah, all that safety stuff can be verified, that systematically staying away from sadness and hurt through your spiritual practice, systematically, intelligently avoiding. This is intelligence, just so we know, right? Like, your system is totally taking care of you guys. This is evolution. And it takes a radical type of willingness to go into this. And frankly, it's just safer to stay angry or to disconnect, because that's often where people with sadness or hurt repression will go. If they can't go to the anger, or if the anger doesn't serve them, there can be a really big disconnection. Or people who repress sadness and hurt, well, obviously disconnected from their bodies. But then that translates to just a disconnection in relationship and a distrust of others because they've been hurt. And you guys have a fear of getting hurt. Fear of feeling that emotion too, that you've buried. So you go to great lengths not to. And you don't know all the lengths that you go to. I've seen that. Like you don't know that when you shut down or when you disconnect that that's your sadness repression or hurt repression because you fooled yourself into not seeing it. I see that with my husband. He just disconnects and he can't help it and he doesn't know it. And I'm the one, because I do disconnection work, that will spot it out for him. But when he starts to look at it, because it's a repression, he's just mostly bamboozled by it because he's like, I really love you. And I know he does. But then he has to disconnect. And that could be disconnection. So you sadness and hurt repressors, I have a fondness for you. I'll just tell you, I married you, right? Well, it's my shadow, both positive and negative, those who repress sadness and hurt. I have just like a lot of love for Chester, and I have all close friends of mine who are sadness, hurt repressors, and I just feel like there's just so misunderstood. I'm going to cry. Because I really love Chester, and he's really misunderstood. He's been labeled with BPD because he can have extreme anger because he can't go to sadness. And it might be some of these, well, people have thrown diagnoses on him, and he just doesn't know yet that it's fully sadness repression because he's had to avoid it, like many of you. Even living with me, he's had to avoid it because he just isn't ready. Somebody living with me, that's actually quite normal if you think about it. He survived by not going to sadness or hurt all growing up. In a relationship, he hasn't gotten to the place where it is safe yet, like a lot of you. And he doesn't do, my own husband does resist the work, like I did for a while, like so many of you do. Because, I'll just tell you, on some level, we want to suffer more than be free. And that's the stay safe, get love. So I can see that, for example, he will not share hurt and sadness because I think he's afraid of losing people. He learned that if you share that, that's weak or something. And so he doesn't share that to keep love, to get love. See, so he thinks he's just getting love when he holds that back. And that's what makes it innocent. He's trying his best to survive and get love and stay safe. He can't do anything other than that until he has more consciousness. That's what I mean. How can you not love somebody when you actually see what's going on? Even if he gets really angry at me. See, that's the whole thing, because he can't go to sadness or hurt, so he gets angry at me. Not really anymore. He's totally different because he's actually gone to the sadness and hurt. He just struggles with it. He doesn't really get angry at me like that anymore, but he used to. And, when I was in repression, I got confused by his anger, and it totally blindsided me. And when I was in anger repression, it just kind of shut me down, or I couldn't meet him. I couldn't meet myself. So now that I've met myself, it's just mostly just compassion and love. I don't have triggers for him because I can see him. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have a trigger with him. It's just a very different relationship now that I'm out of repression, because he still has his repression, but he also knows on an energetic level that getting angry will not work with me it just doesn't work. And so his system, until he gets to inquiry deeper, is just trying to figure out how to relate to me. So he's just finding different responses to his upset because the anger just is so obviously a cover-up job. And I can meet him in the anger. And that's terribly threatening because I'm an anger repressor. An anger repressor coming out of anger repression, hell hath no fury for that, because we've been hurt and we've been holding back anger. So once we have that online, we have everything online. We're dangerous in a relationship, but also, really loving, but we can be pretty zen-like because we're not hiding anymore. And that can be threatening to the sadness repressor who used anger to hurt people. You can't hurt me with your anger anymore. And that's the difference. That's empowering, by the way, for anger repressors. But it's disempowering for sadness and anger hurt repressors because that's their coping mechanism. Well, it's not disempowering. It's just that they until they go to the sadness or hurt, they need their different ways of checking out. And it can get bad if you lose your ability to check out and you haven't healed yet. It's like losing options. Like, for example, with so many of you with sadness or hurt repression also have addiction and mental health issues. Look for that. And physical health issues, which you have not tied to sadness or hurt repression yet. But the science is just right there, guys. That to me is, burying your head in the sand like I did, where you have a serious illness or mental health issue, and maybe you're involved in the spiritual thing over here and totally ignoring some really important information over here in science. If you go learn that information, then come back here, we can help you. But if you stay where you're just doing the purely spiritual thing and you're not paying attention to over there, I think you're going to miss this whole boat here. And it's a big miss, because if you haven't linked up your mental health issues, your addiction, and your physical issues, what I've learned about repression is those don't get better, or you get other ones later. And so, take care of yourself. This is such a loving, do you see how loving this work really is? I just felt that. Like, here I am encouraging somebody who's terrified of going to sadness or hurt, and I just want to hold you so you can go to it, because my God, if you don't, you might get sick. So that's how loving this is. Even though it's going to be painful and scary, let's do it. Let's do it. I saved my life. Let's save your life. Let's save your health. Let's get you free. I don't know how. This is not an inside out path video where I'm showing you how to do it. I'm just more encouraging, I think, for those. Because see, the people who are already doing this work, they can just go to the members area and get any skill update that they need. It's all there. But there's so many people out here who I don't need to be just doing skills with you, because if you want to do the work, you'll find it. What I really need to be doing is just talking to you, heart to heart, human to human here, to see that to help you see that this is really the issue. So another thing that I see, when you guys have the mental health issue, and then you have the addiction, and then the spiritual seeking, sadness, hurt repressors, physical health issues. The other thing I notice with some sadness or hurt repressors is that the longer you stay in spirituality and like therapy or self-help, the more you get into this pattern of going in every direction other than the root. And everybody has that. So anger repressors do that too. I did that. But I've just noticed it because I'm with somebody like that. And I just want to bring it up because I've noticed it a lot. It's really, really terrifying to go to the sadness or hurt. That's why I have such compassion for you, because it's not terrifying for me. So I have compassion because I don't feel that suffering. And then the other part of the compassion is I totally get, because it's so terrifying, why you don't want to do it. And then so you'll go to the doctor like me because you don't want to feel that. You'll go to the therapist, but you won't go to a therapist that does the somatic work, because there's great therapists out there who could help you reverse the repression. But I've seen you guys go to your talk therapist or your somatic therapist that don't dig into the unconscious. And that's all safe. Or you go to your 12-step. Guys, it'll keep you clean, but it doesn't get to your sadness repression. I just have never saw anybody in 12-step who said, I just reversed my sadness and hurt repression. And if you're not hearing people say that in any community, it's not happening. And you're staying safe by being there. So much to say, even though it's not my experience. Yeah, it's just like the mouse running through the maze endlessly with sadness and hurt repression. And I just want to say, my God, I love you. Stop. Stop for a second. Stop. What are you doing? Do you know where you're going? Do you know what you're doing or why you're doing it? If you would stop for a moment, see, you're operating on autopilot. Many of you are in survival mode with the sadness and the hurt repression, because you're getting angry, or you've got a lot of anger, you've got seeking, you're trying to deal with all that with your addictions. You've got to stop for a second and hear me. Because, by the way, all these teachers who say just rest and let all that be, that's not the answer, guys, because you know that. Many of you already, you're still angry and you're still getting sick and you still have addictions. So I want you to trust your experience more, because this is one thing I have difficulty with sadness or hurt repressors is saying, I know that you want enlightenment and I know that you're seeking, and I know that this message is more threatening than those other teachings. But the reason that this is threatening is because I'm getting to the root with you. You've got to stop for a moment and ask yourself what you want. You really do. All of us do. Just sit here with me for a second and go into this. Do you, first of all, know that you bury hurt or sadness? Can we just double check that first? For those, what you want to do is pull up your VIPs. You're very important people. Dad, mom, important relationships. And then feel into your inner body. And then just say several times, like you rev it up. I can get sad. I can be sad with them. I can show my hurt. I'm not sad. I'm not hurt. And just evoke that with reverse inquiries, like to see if your body disagrees. I'm not hurt at all by mom and dad. They never hurt me. I'm not sad about what happened. I can express my sadness. See, if you keep saying it, sadness repressors won't experience sadness, or they might experience sadness or hurt on the top of a contraction, like seeping out of it, but not really full-on emotion because they're protected by it. So here you would feel like, yeah, contraction, or like, no, I mean, I am sad, I'm hurt, but I can't. Just a sense of that, or some of you wouldn't even hear that. You'd just be quiet and your body's doing something. And so because it's not hurt or sadness, right there, I mean, it's repressed. It's contraction or pain. Right there is where the bypass happens, as because you would experience that contraction in spiritual practice or anywhere. And you would think, well, that's not sadness or hurt. Just like us anger repressors. Well, we got a contraction, not angry. That's just a contraction. Don't know what that is, but it's not anger. Well, yeah, it's anger and fear for anger repressors. And it's essentially sadness, hurt, fear, all their shame and joy and all that in there. For the sadness repressor, it's the vulnerable emotions that are repressed. It's just so all very clear to me now. That's why I have a lightness around it, but it's not a light subject, as we know. Like, we are trying, like, with all the energy we have to avoid this. And so our work is cut out for you, us. So you have that contraction, right? We just did that little test. If you trust your body, you know that you have sadness or hurt repression. So I'll tell you that with sadness or hurt repression, you also have unprocessed fear, because you're afraid to feel and express sadness. So that fear is layered in with the sadness and is also part of the contraction or the body stuff. So when you do KI, you're going to see not just layers of hurt or sadness, but the fear of that. It's going to be a lot of it. For those who've bypassed this, there's your contraction. A lot of it is fear. And you're going to work through that in layers slowly. There's really no such thing as just, it's very rare for contraction to just instantly dissolve. And in fact, if you're looking for that, you might actually be trying to just avoid stuff. You're trying to find a quick fix or something. But KI is about slowly transmuting this energy over time, feeling safe enough to transmute the sadness or hurt repression in different relationships and how they show up. That's why I need you to stop and hear me, so you can first see that sadness or hurt repression is driving your suffering. And then once you see it, you have to really stop and create a different practice, because if you're like me, your practice of resting or mindfulness or meditation is not only wholly inadequate, but it's reinforcing it, because you're staying safe with that practice, see? So did you know that your spiritual practice then is helping you store sadness and hurt? By not getting to it, your practice is helping that, see? Really, really important information. to not bury your head in the sand. Okay. So for those of you, well, many of you already knew you had this. That's why you turned the video on. But some of you just learned that you have that sadness, hurt, repression. So now that it's more direct experience for everybody, let me say a few things to look out for that will snag you and sabotage this path, and also just basically not only sabotage the path, but you might not take you out of the path, these little things, but these are going to be the bumps in the road. Sometimes they're mountains. And if you don't see them coming, or you don't know how to raise your skill level, any one of these could take you out of KI. And that's exactly what your system wants, to stay safe and get love. And that's how it's going to continue suffering, by not getting to the root. This is not the only place that you can get to the root, but we get to the root here. So if you resist getting to the root here, God, I hope you find another modality that gets to the root directly, because your system doesn't want you to. And it would rather you do the bypassing stuff because it's safer and you can get love that way. You can get love. By the way, we bypass to get love too, because by not going into the buried emotions, we keep our ego identities in place on some level. I'm a good teacher. See, I don't do my anger repression work, so I get to be the good teacher identity. So if you're earnest about non-duality, is my view, you should be looking at repression, because repression produces these false identities that we end up, questioning on the path. Or, yeah, there's no way around that one. Think about it. If you want to wake up, you can't still believe that you have to be good, or whatever you're believing from the repression, because that's a trauma response, and that's not what you are. So identity has to be taken care of. But I'm going to talk about the pitfalls here and the traps, the different ways in which you could come into KI or possibly other paths and just totally miss this and get right back on the bypassing bandwagon. Before I go into these pitfalls, and I'm out of breath because I went to get my drink heated. Know what I am doing in this video and what I'm not doing. I'm not guiding you through inquiry. And I'm not showing you how to do the inside out path. See, if I were doing a video like that, I would slow down and just take you through that. It would be more experiential. This is for people. See, because once you know you have sadness or hurt, repression, the answer is to the inside out path. The answer is not to sit with me for an hour here and let me wash away your sadness, repression, because it's not going to happen. I don't have that power. I just have skills that you can adopt and then bring into your life and heal the trauma. And I can be a guide along the way, but I'm not going to do it for you. So to the extent that you're in a habit of going to teachers' videos from time to time, thinking that that's going to happen, that's not going to happen here. Instead, what's going to happen is I'm going to download this information, and if it resonates, you're going to pick up the tools and start taking care of yourself. I'm just a messenger is all I am. I am not your father, your mother, in the end, there will be no dependency on me because of this path, because it'll clear up any trauma bond. So you might as well start standing on your own 2 feet now and start learning the skills, and don't rely on me to give you everything here. I'm just getting you started. It's all up to you. You have to do this work. There's no single teacher who can bestow anything on you at all when it comes to embodiment. It's all you and your work. And so we resist this work. That's why I have to put it back on your plate, because you resist it, right? Because your resistance to it is how you're trying to stay safe. So as a teacher, I have to mirror that back to you and say, you're just trying to stay safe. Pick up the tools and move through your resistance. I don't want to do it for you, because that makes you safe. If I sit here and hold the space all the time, and you never develop the capacity to hold what arises, or to prompt up what arises, or to be skillful with what arises, I'm actually like making it worse for you. You're becoming dependent on me. You might be freer, but you don't know even where I'm taking you or how to go there yourself. Think about that. So if I take you to this deep place, you can't go there on your own if I do it for you. If I show you how to do it, though, then you can always take care of yourself. Difference. So I'm not showing you how right now. I'm not teaching really in that way, and I'm not pointing. Okay, I'm just trying to get people to see that this is the root of suffering, and then to change course. The pitfalls, I've already listed some of them. One of the biggest pitfalls is that sadness or hurt repressors will go in every direction other than the place where they need to go. So what you could do is an inventory on your life right now or today, where you journal everything that you're doing to heal or awaken, and just see how many different directions you're going in, except for the direction that KI and science tells you to go in, which is the sadness or hurt repression. Just list them all so you can see the amount of energy that you're spending to get away from the trauma. And then look at the modalities that you're involved in, or the practices that actually do not target sadness or hurt repression directly. So if you've got a meditation practice over here, you just want to look at that practice. Is there anything about that practice that you know for sure gets to sadness, buried hurt, or sadness? If you can't just name something, it shouldn't be a rocket science or anything like that. In KI, we're not hiding the ball. It's not rocket science. You know exactly what we're doing. We're going straight to the repression of emotion. So if you have a modality that's not doing that, that's keeping people really safe, and you still think it's getting to sadness or hurt repression, you'll keep doing it, staying safe, bamboozling yourself. So what I would do is an inventory on all your practices, and only include those practices that complement what we're doing here, which would be like awareness-based practices or meditation that just regulate the system. So it would be good to use meditation and resting as awareness as a way to, like, not for the deep work, but to kind of regulate, just to be with what comes up and continue being with what comes up, and grounding yourself as awareness, mining, doing things like that. That's what I think meditation and mindfulness and those practices are for. Don't be fooled into thinking that they're getting to the trauma, though, if they're not. And if they're not, you're going to use those as soothing modalities or resources to self-regulate during the deep trauma work in KI. And then some practices will go away completely because they don't really soothe. Let's say they don't really regulate your system, and they don't go to the trauma repression. Maybe they go to identity. Maybe you've been questioning self-limiting beliefs, but that doesn't quite align with KI because the self-limiting beliefs are coming from the sadness or hurt repression. So if you just question self-limiting beliefs, you might be bypassing the repression that creates them in that modality. So if you bring that modality here with KI, you've got a bypassing modality included with KI, and you're fighting yourself. Get rid of all modalities that do not support the work that you're doing here, because you could just be making it harder for yourself, really trying to stay safe, and that thwarts what we're doing here as you just go back to safety and whatever that else, feeling good, feeling always wanting to not feel stuff, all that. Another trap is, this is like little sub-traps within all that. There's just little things that can happen that can take you off track. The big thing is just missing the repression. That's my first one, is like just going in all these different directions away from the sadness or hurt repression, which is right there in the body. But in that, here's examples of that. So in practice, like in inquiry, but also in life, when you get too close to the sadness or hurt, you wouldn't even know it because it's repressed. So I want you just to look at where you do go in inquiry, practice, or relationship, and you can usually spot it. They're both the same because the inside and outside are one. So when you're doing inquiry on the inner body around hurt repression, you're going to see deficiency stories and characters there that reinforce the repression in your consciousness. And then in your life, you'll see that. You'll see that, for example, well, in your inquiry, Instead of being able to go to hurt or sadness, anger comes up. And you'll notice that in inquiry, and you'll start to learn how to go instead to the sadness or hurt, repression, skillfully. You'll also see that in life, the inside and outside, inside-outside path. In life, you'll see that with your partner, for example, when you get triggered, you might go to anger instead of hurt or sadness, of course, because it's repressed. But if you keep doing that, see, that's one little thing that I want to show you. If you keep processing anger when it's not repressed, you're staying safe. So that's a trap. That's the big Scott Killaby trap. I kept going to hurt or sadness and avoiding the anger repression. Many of you guys are going to anger and avoiding the hurt or sadness because the hurt or sadness is a contraction in your body or pain, and you don't really even know it's there. Or if you know it's there, you don't know how to thaw it out. And the other thing is just the usual non-dual bypass. If hurt and sadness repressors, if I don't see them going to process anger, I'll see them going, like so many good spiritual seekers, to process identity. And that's the bypass. Because just like with anger repression, sadness repression produces these identities. If you have to hold back sadness and hurt, which is true for you as a kid, that was a true emotion for you, then you're forced to identify with what's false for the rest of your life to protect yourself. So you're identifying with a deficiency story, which is not you. And there might even be anger with that, right? So sadness repressors, when they feel the deficiency story, they might feel anger. They might not feel that. The point being, if you just question that, that's safe. So you question the identity, or you let it come and go, and then there's presence that remains. But then buried in that is the sadness, hurt, repression, conditioning that produce that. And so that'll produce that again. Yeah, you definitely don't want to get into the business of just questioning identity over and over, or even shadow. When you question identity or shadow, you want to go to repression. Holding sadness back, that programming needs to be made conscious in other programs. Looking at identity, not at all. No, it's not just it's not recommended. Don't do it. It's just a bypass. That's me coming out of repression, because in the old days I would have said, well, I don't know if you should. No, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do that. If you get triggered by me saying that, that's your work to do. Because all I'm doing is sharing an opinion. I have that right. See, I used to not be able to say that. Don't do that, guys. That's why I was leading people into bypass, because I couldn't say the truth of my experience. I didn't know it. You do whatever you want, right? But if you trust me at all, I'm telling you, 15 years as a teacher, 14,000 sessions, I have some experience to share with you. Don't do that. Don't get stuck in questioning identity. It's just way too safe, really. And how do you embody that? Because the repression's driving it. How are you going to embody realization if you just go to identity, which is often really heady? It's mental. Plus, there's energy with it, but the energy is repressed. So go to the repression, which is the contraction under the identity. Traps. Well, they're just the usual traps. They're not really traps. It's just the suffering of the sadness and hurt repressor. Well, there's a lot of different things I could say, but some people with that particular repression grew up in families that just felt like things aren't fair and things are wrong. And if you think about a kid who feels that way about something going on in the family, but can't express the hurt around that, but yet they're deeply hurt about that. Just feeling like, life isn't fair, or I'm not being treated fairly, or you're doing something wrong, you're doing something to me. But see, the sadness or hurt repressor doesn't have something online that they desperately need, the sadness or the hurt. So when that happens, where do you think they go? Anywhere but that, right? So if something happens in their relationship that's like not fair, or it's like you did something to me, If they could go to hurt or sadness, they could resolve the issue so much better. But they can't. So they might go to anger, or they might go to a deficiency story or something that's safer, or shut down, or they might go numb out on drugs. See? But what they really need to do is to be able to go into the feeling that this is wrong, that this is not fair, and then to the repression of the hurt or sadness under that, which doesn't arise to awareness. So if you just sit there and rest as awareness, you're not going to see it. But if you become skillful, right under that identity is the repression driving it. And that's the healing part that people just miss all the time. 99% of the people in spirituality miss it, is what I've seen. There's just a small percentage of us that are now healing trauma and repression. I mean that, even if that's a stark statistic, I actually think that's true. I can't know it for sure. The bypass is the norm. And spirituality is the norm, is what I'm seeing. Okay, so other pitfalls and traps. There are definitely certain trauma bonds that you guys have to watch out for with teachers. And you might be drawn to teachers who, for example, can get angry because you understand it and you have compassion for it. But if that person is getting angry because that's a coping strategy for unprocessed hurt or repression, you're in a trauma bond. You're with somebody who's teaching you not to go to the core emotion and kind of modeling the behavior of trauma response. But if you don't ask questions, you don't know where the person's anger is coming from. That's why I say you have to ask your teachers questions. Is anger safer for you than hurt? Like when you grew up, really grill them, because they're in repression. They're going to just dodge all the questions. They're going to give you spiritual answers, basically, or non-dual answers. But you have to pin them down because you put your life in their hands. Your emotional system essentially is in their hands. So tell me your relationship with anger. And if they can't articulate what repression is and why the anger is there, is it a coping strategy that's safer, or is this a primary emotion that you're experiencing, that you're not using it to cover something else up, but it's actually your authentic emotion here? If a teacher isn't transparent, you might think whatever you think, which would serve your shadow. So, telling yourself whatever you're telling yourself to not go to the hurt or sadness, just like that person, because everybody's staying safe in that trauma bond. Question your teachers, I'm telling you. Ask them questions, especially as you become more insightful about the nature of trauma and repression and how it drives things. Okay, but also trauma bonding in relationship. These aren't really pitfalls. There's just, this is your life, right? Of the sadness hurt repressor. You might be in a relationship with an anger repressor. Me. And we're good for you and bad for you if we're in repression. Well, we can trigger you for sure, right? Because we don't get angry. That's one thing. But we don't express. You don't really know what we're feeling. You ever have that sense when you're with an anger repressor? It's like you want to know more. Like, are you mad? And you might think, of course, then that anger repressors are mad at you when they're not talking to you. And they are. Unless they're clear, and they're really not. But your suspicions are correct. And that can drive you a little bit crazy, sadness and hurt repressors. I get that, right? Because it's like, you know that they're angry, but they're not telling you. That can be a trigger. Because it feels like something is wrong. It doesn't feel fair, or whatever that trigger is, like it hits a unlovable or something. A whole bunch of triggers can come just from having sadness, hurt, repression, and being with an anger repressor. Your anger would be a trigger for the anger repressor. So that's a whole set of issues that comes up when you're trying to resolve an issue and you have anger and they can't go there. And then your anger becomes an issue for them, but they might not express it exactly what it is because they can't feel and express their anger. if you can see the potential pitfalls here, you can also see that it's all your work to do, because you don't want to get involved in the anger repressor stuff. Trust me, I wouldn't do it. If there's one thing I've seen about trauma healing is that everything is on your side. Just stick with that. Once you start getting into the anger repressors stuff, I think you just have to deal with people on the face. So when you deal with an anger repressor, do your work. And I don't know what the particular trigger is, so I can't really tell you what that work is now. But your shadows are going to come out in that relationship. There's going to be something about the person that bothers you. That's a way into repression. And that person's going to trigger you into a deficiency story, and that's obviously a way into repression, as I've shown you guys. So the path is already here. It's just a matter of that you learn it. And with regard to there's a trigger there. Of course, that's going to come, and when the trigger comes, if you don't go to the sadness or hurt, once again, see, you miss it, bypass it. It's almost like when you bypass the hurt or sadness, you're just begging for more suffering and inauthenticity in the future, because you're literally not being real in that moment or those moments. So look for, in addition to the trigger, look for, as a sadness or hurt repressor, how we anger repressors or others show up vulnerably or in a way that's a trigger for you, because you have to repress the sadness or hurt. So if I show up as like an anger repressor who's being vulnerable, that might just be a trigger, period. Vulnerability. But if it's fake vulnerability, if it feels like the anger repressor is really angry, that could also be a trigger. But just the vulnerability itself I want you to notice that as sadness, hurt repressors, because it just gets too close to that for you. So when your partner is vulnerable or being sensitive, it's not that you have to be careful, because you don't have to take care of their feelings, but look to see if there's a shadow there. And the way you would do that is like, I can be vulnerable like that. I can show hurt or sadness. And then you guys will probably feel a no. And you're going to want to process that. But all forms of suffering are coming from your sadness, hurt, repression. And you should know that too by going to my How to Start the Inside Out Path video. But let's just do a little bit here around seeking. Because if sadness, hurt, repressors don't understand that the seeking is coming from the repression, well, problem. So look to see what you're seeking to heal, to get better, to awaken. Whatever that may be, really build it up. Like, I'm not there yet. I've got to get there. I'm not there. Feel it. And then do a boomerang. What identity or deficiency story comes up for me as I look at this thing that I'm seeking, but I'm not there yet? Feel into in the body. There's this sense of lack or deficiency showing up in the body. There's the identity. Do you hear it? Okay, this is the identity that's doing the seeking. See that? This identity is repression. It's emotional deficiency. Bring your VIPs up. Mom, Dad, and the others. And just trust your body. I'm not hurt by them. I'm not sad. I can express the hurt to them. Or I can express the sadness. That's just for the point of seeing that the energy there of the repression is the same energy of the identity, which is the energy of the seeking. But your system has totally shut it out. See how you can't see it? So all you see is your seeking. Or you might see the deficiency story, but you're not aware of the repression driving it. And that's how your system wants it, so that you won't get to that. But in order to heal, you have to get to that, because this seeking is suffering, And all of your safety programs in different ways, even though they're keeping you safe, they are the root of suffering. Okay, let me talk about later in the path. So sadness or hurt repressors have to come in contact with something like the victim identity, the feeling of being like they're hurt, they've hurt me, I'm hard done by. Now, some sadness and hurt repressors will have repressed that identity because they want to appear strong. You have to be careful with that, right? I have to be strong. You don't be careful with it. You want to process it, though, because that's a trauma response. It's just like the anger repressor has to be good or peaceful. The sadness repressor has to be strong. Then there's no place for some of you then for an identity of I'm a victim, or it might be buried. But if you bring the identity of victim in and really feel how you have that, come out of repression around it, then you can get to the hurt or sadness. But in order to really heal, I think you have to see, just like I've seen, that you have to be hurt and afraid. You have to be sad and afraid. That's why you stored it your whole life. You have to hold on to those emotions to be you. Right now, you might be in repression, so you might not even think you have it, or it's buried, or maybe you're somewhere on the path and you know that you're sad or hurt, but you haven't yet seen that you're generating this. At some point in the path, through what we call the back door, I don't want to let go of this. We discover, oh, I have to be hurt and afraid. I have to be sad and afraid. Now, when you recognize that, it'll be later in the path. That is going to be a game changer. All your suffering will be going away if there's any left at that point, because you'll see that you're creating it all. This is the end of sabotage. So as you see triggers or things that are blocks in your life or whatever, you'll be able to go straight to I have to create this. I have to believe this. I have to be hurt and afraid. And by making all that conscious, all that goes away. Anything you bring, make that conscious. That energy, that stuff just goes away. And then there's the end of sabotage for you. There's the end of seeking. There's the end of suffering. Now, easier said than done, but there's actually a pretty clear path here. You just have to move through it. If you don't ever get to the place where you're seeing that you're creating it all, you're not going to be able to end this path. I don't think. You're not going to be able to heal or embody this realization, because you're creating it unconsciously, not consciously. But the programming that we do not process in the body creates that. So that's effectively like we're creating it, because we can't divorce our bodies from our self and say that we're not doing it. Like, well, we are. It's just that we're unconscious to it. I hit so many things here. I'll just tell you this in case you don't know, and then I'm going to go. All forms of suffering are coming, for the most part, from sadness and hurt repression, including fear of being hurt or feeling sadness or hurt. All forms of suffering. So if you're not doing inquiry, sadness, hurt, repression, trauma inquiry on all the forms of suffering, you're bypassing, in my view, because all the forms of suffering come from that. That's science, but it's also verifiable. Your shadows come from that. Your deficiency stories, as I've said, come from that. You'll find that even depression and anxiety comes from unfelt or unprocessed emotions. Addiction comes from stuffing down those emotions. Seeking is not opening to those emotions and trying to get rid of them in the future. Shut down and freeze is just protection in the moment against those emotions. Instead of showing and feeling hurt, you might freeze or shut down. All these forms of suffering, contraction, chronic pain, as science says, all your repression. So the question to you is, are you aligned with that yet? Are you still going in a different direction? As if trauma is not doing this in your life. And I mean, you can go in subtly, slightly different directions and bypass, because the issue is that you're afraid and you're hurt and you buried it. And then there are identities that come from that. So, I mean, just little venturing off of that can keep you safe. That's why I've really narrowed this work down to something very specific, because of our tendency to avoid and bypass. That's our default system, bypassing. Oh, and love repression. Well, I don't want to just tag that on. I need to do. Okay, so I said that I was going to title this video in the beginning of sadness, hurt, and love repression. I'm just going to say a few things about love repression and then treat that topic separately. See, the reason I brought it in is because if I can't show vulnerable hurt and sadness, how am I going to open and show love? Fear. Yeah, so quite often, very often, much more common than not, somebody who represses sadness or hurt also has a lot of fear about really being loving, freely and fully loving, being love. It's just too scary. And the same contraction that shuts them down around sadness or hurt will shut them down around the expression of love. Include that in your primary. See, if you have that, you just want to include that. Hope this helps, guys.